doing. So, uh, I'm a little nervous, but also not at the same time. I talk for a living. I'm a therapist, so I talk to my clients all the time, but I have a personal goal for myself for 2025 to do more live content uh, on YouTube, on Instagram, just because, not only is sex education important, but also um, I want to get better at doing this live stuff, if you will, no editing. If you've ever created YouTube videos or really any sort of content, and you edit your own stuff, you can sort of get in your head a little bit. There are so many times where I will be editing a video and I find myself just constantly, messing up or wanting to redo everything. So with a live, you can't really do that. And that's sort of why um, I'm here. That's sort of why I'm doing this. So is to just give you this unedited live view of myself and sort of how I talk about really sex therapy with all my clients, with people, but more specifically, talk about books because I get asked all the time, what are the top books that I recommend to clients? And I got to tell you, there are so many books. There are so many books that are out there. There are so many ways of, or I should say, authors that put out great content. And so I could have given all of you 100 books, right? But I'm only choosing 10 that I really refer to everyone that sit in my office in plain sight of everyone so that they can see them. So uh, I guess for those of you who are watching this who don't know who I am, my name is Matt Lockman. I'm the owner of Cleveland Sex Therapy in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a licensed clinical therapist, an ASEX certified sex therapist, and I am an ASEX certified sex therapist. Sorry, I just got a text from somebody. ASEX certified sex therapist, licensed professional clinical counselor and therapist. So I love doing this. I do this for a living, and I will just get underway with the top 10 books that I recommend for all my clients. So the first one, you may know this one already. You may have seen it before or read it, but it is called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. So I hope if you're subscribed to this channel, you have heard me talk about this book before, but it is pretty phenomenal. I would say it's one of the most groundbreaking books that, has come out in the last 2 decades that has really changed how people view sex and intimacy and desire and relationships. And so why this book is amazing is Emily doesn't really do anything new outside of just putting it into her own words. The idea of responsive desire has existed for a while. Rosemary Bassoon, she talked a lot about it in her research. She's sort of the pioneer in regards to responsive desire. But what Emily does is she makes it extremely user friendly. So when you get this book, it's really centered around the dual response model of arousal, which is spontaneous versus responsive desire. And I'm not going to spoil it for all of you, but essentially, not everyone just wants to bang all the time, right? Not everyone just has this spark that goes off and you just want to have sex. In fact, that is such a small percentage of our population. Most people are what we call responsive desire, which means we all have brakes and accelerators. We all have turn ons and turn offs. And if we want to engage with intimacy, we just have to let people know what our turn ons are. And we have to let people know not to hit our turn offs. So I had the pleasure of speaking to Emily Nagoski, of seeing her live at a conference that I went to last year, the ASECT conference. And she talked in a lot of detail about her second book that came out last year or 2 years ago called Come Together, which is another phenomenal book. And what's great is she's so engaging, and she does a lot of her own research. And so when you read her books, it comes from a place um, of just knowledge and expertise. I will say there are some people in the field um, who do not like Emily Nagoski, which is really wild to me. There are some people who think she is just rebranding research that's already been existed or that's existed and calling it her own. And to those people, I say, isn't that what we all do? Right? Like we all find all of these new ways of trying to get this information out into the world to the people that we care about, to our clients, because again, our world is really sex negative. So I don't know about you, but in my Catholic grade school and high school, I did not learn anything about intimacy or arousal. Um, and the fact that Emily has made it so digestible for the regular person, that is what is really cool. And that is why, I'm starting off my list with this book. So, highly recommend it. All right, you should just see I have this like giant stack right here that which one do I want to choose next? So I'm gonna choose a book that's probably not as common to uh, you know, the clients in the world or the general population, but is really popular with sex therapists. And that is Jessica O'Reilly and Marla Stewart's The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay. Um, Look at those ladybugs. They are just having a blast. But this book was one of the first books that I got as a young sex therapist, engaging with clients, engaging with the world. And I got to tell you, I was very pleasantly surprised by this. There are a lot of books that exist in the realm of sex therapy that just, how do I phrase this? There are a lot of phenomenal books that exist, but there are a lot of books that are sort of like a lot of fluff, or what's that called? Like word salad. You're just sort of saying the same stuff over and over again. And what I found to be really helpful with Jessica and Marla's book is it is so tangible, and it is broken down section by section. Really, when you think about it, the ultimate guide to seduction and foreplay. So it's really broken down into that arousal, desire piece first. And then from there moves into foreplay, which is a fine word. I don't really love the word foreplay that much anymore. Foreplay sort of makes it think like this is what is done before sex happens. But sex is just constantly happening when we're engaging with other people, right? Like if I am providing oral sex or I'm touching genitals, some people could say that's foreplay, but I personally believe that that's just sex. That's what we're engaging in. So this foreplay piece, what's great about it is it's all about things you can do during sex and intimacy, ways to spice things up with your partner. So I would highly recommend this to everyone. I mean, I am. It's on my list of 8 books. So definitely check it out. Again, really tangible. And I should say with all of these books that I'm talking about today, You don't have to read them cover to cover. All sex therapy books, not all, let's not speak in, all or nothings. Let's say 99% of sex therapy books, you could just pick up and go to sort of the table of contents section and pick and choose what works for you or what you want to learn about. Right. So, chapter 4 in this book is seduction communication. If that's good for you, then you can go to chapter 7, which is how to seduce somebody. Right. Or chapter 13, physical foreplay, the penis program. Right. Which is all about how do you engage with penises. Or chapter 12, which is the vulva version. Right. So, you can really jump around to any part of this book. But again, great book to check out. Next up, switching gears slightly, because sex education is really important and crucial for all of us. It saves lives. So, whenever anyone asks me for like one specific book on teaching sex ed to young adults, teenagers, I always go to this Wait What book, right? So, this is a comic book, if you will. It's illustrated, but let me tell you, it provides all of the sex positive sex education that we all need in this world, right? So it's a comic book guide to relationships, bodies, and growing up by Heather Corinna and Isabella Rotman. It just really takes you through everything, right? So when you look at this, chapter 3 is puberty. So it helps you speak to your children about puberty. It helps the child then look at this and be like, okay, what can I expect here? It talks about maturity, growing up, talks about masturbation. Jesus, that is just so essential when you are young and growing up, exploring your body and understanding like what happens when I touch my genitals. What am I experiencing? Right. So it actually touches on it and doesn't shy away from it and say, no, 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 do that by yourself. Right. Nobody wants to see you. Do that. I don't know how many people I've talked to that carry so much shame around masturbation, that were caught and yelled at, or they were never taught that it was a healthy part of human sexuality. And so they don't really engage with it, or they keep it really secret, right? And they tell their partners, I don't masturbate. Why would I need to masturbate? I have you, right? And it's cringe, right? I feel so bad. This is why I sort of do the work that I do, is to help people understand that they don't have to feel fear around it. But goes into genitals, talks a little bit about gender, which is awesome. And then it moves into consent, right? This book made for teens talks about consent. Like if these books existed, which they probably did when I was a kid, I would love to have read them, right? And then again, it just goes into sexual identity, right? Readiness to have sex. So this book is really truly made um, for, I would say, people 10 or 11 to 15 and 16, right? And it's sort of produced by Scarleteen, which, if you're in the sex ed world, you understand Scarleteen is just this sex ed haven. It's beautiful. Scarleteen.com, Scarleteen. You can go there. I send people there as well. Sexpositivefamilies.org is another phenomenal place to go to for sex education resources. But right here, Wait What, phenomenal book. Highly recommend that. Okay, I need some coffee. It is really cold here today in Cleveland. And I don't know where any of you are in the world, but in snowy places, I have these really blue eyes. And whenever, that sounded really weird to say, I just have blue eyes, right? And whenever there's snow on the ground and it's sunny out, I mean, it's just purely blinding, right? like you can't see anything. And so I'm constantly looking out my window right now, squinting. Anywho, back to the books. But this next book uh, is one that came out, I believe, last year or 2 years ago. When did this book come out? 2023, right? So 2 years ago. It's Dr. Emily Morse's Smart Sex. So you may know Dr. Emily because she has a very famous podcast called Sex with Emily. It's probably the number one, if not in the like top five sex and relationship podcasts that exist. She's been around forever. She gives some really good feedback. It's rare that I listen to an episode with her and think, "Oh, that's outdated," or "That's something from the past," or "That's something we want to stray away from." She is really giving all of this updated content, and I love it. And so she decided to write a book, and she published this book. And let me tell you, it sort of surprised me at how good it was. How to boost your sex IQ and your own pleasure. And why it surprised me is it because I I didn't think that she would write a good book, but it surprised me because again, like I've been saying, a lot of sex therapy books you read and you're like, especially if you're already a certified therapist or someone that reads a lot of sex therapy books, it sort of just becomes rote, right? It's like, what is some new information that is showing up for us? What's new information that I can pass on to clients? Again, a lot of these books aren't made for the therapist, they're made for the client. But what's really cool about what she does is she brands herself as like boosting your sex IQ, which essentially is just what you know about sex. And she starts with like, what do you know about your body, right? What do you know about pleasure? Let's just start there. Let's start internal and then we'll move into this space of exploring with other people. So, outside of talking about lubrication, orgasms, different positions, what I really like truly about this book is she has a whole section on anal sex. And that is not something that I find a lot of people write about or talk about, especially cisgendered women like herself. Emily talks a lot about anal sex. She talks about all of the anal orgasms that can be felt not only by female identifying individuals, male identifying individuals, everybody. And so this is a really cool book to check out if you are interested in not only anal sex or learning more about anal orgasms, but also just in general, a new way of looking at how do I understand my sexual self and my sexual identity before I go engage with it with other people. So, cool book. Okay. Almost halfway through. I guess we're halfway through now. What I will say about this next book, I talk about this one often. I've talked about it on this channel a lot. This is out of all of these books, yeah, I would say this has been the most life-changing book um, of my life, not only as a professional, but also as a sexual individual. This is when I talk about radical, I mean radical, capital R, radical way of looking at sex and relationships and intimacy. And this dude is my mentor. He doesn't know it, but he is. I follow all of his content. It's rare that he produces something, if ever, that I've disagreed with. But yes, it is Rebel Love by Dr. Chris Donaghue. And let me tell you all the ways why I love this book. It says, break the rules, destroy toxic habits, and have the best sex of your life. Um, the forward is by Amber Rose. So I don't know if you remember Amber Rose. Amber Rose was awesome and great. She recently just came out in full total support of um, you know, he who must not be named, I guess. So that was really shocking and surprising. She has the forward in this book. You can skip that piece if you want. But this is just such a life-changing book, not only for me, but for a lot of people. And actually, it is a polarizing book. I've given this to some clients and they have totally rejected it. And they're like, I hate this. This feels way too radical. This feels way too intense. I've had some therapists even reach out to me and be like, why are you recommending this book? And I stand by it all the time because it really talks from the perspective of sex is for you and relationships are for you, and they are not for other people, right? And so he dives into this whole idea and all of these concepts around we really want to be selfish. And that's a really strong word for people, but we want to be selfish when it comes to intimacy and relationships so that we are getting what we want out of them and then helping the people that we engage with get what they want out of them as well. So, for instance, if I am going on a date with somebody, I want to make sure that how do I phrase this? I want to make sure that this person is fitting everything that I want and not the other way around. I'm not trying to fit into their life, right? I shouldn't be lucky that they are, that I'm going on a date with them. It's almost this idea of like, I need to have confidence and empowerment and know that I have goals around this, right? I'm going into dating, I'm going into having sex because it's for me. And I get why people think it's selfish, but it's not. It is empowering, right? If I enter a sexual experience and all I think about is is my partner enjoying this, right? Am I doing the right stuff? How is my penis functioning, right? How is all of this stuff? Am I in the moment? Probably not. I'm probably putting a lot of pressure on this experience and really hoping that the other person enjoys it, which is very cool. I want everyone to enjoy the encounters. But if I'm focusing too much on another person's enjoyment and not on what I'm doing and how I'm feeling, then I'm not truly engaging with my sexual self, right? So some people say, well, I want my partner to enjoy it. I want my partner to enjoy sex. And of course you do. So what do? You check in throughout the experience, right? You talk about, I like this, I don't like this, right? Actually, something that really turns me on is when you play with my nipples. Can you really do that? Can you engage with that? Sure, I can, or no, I can't. He talks a lot about active communication during sex, which is huge, right? Because a lot of people, the moment they start engaging, they just fully tune out, right? They tune out of their bodies or they don't talk, and then it can just be a totally different experience. So he talks about this, or he talks about sex a lot. He also talks about body acceptance and radical self love, right? How all bodies are beautiful bodies, all bodies are healthy bodies. And it's really hard to find that, especially in content specifically around sex. Sonia Renee Taylor's book that, oh, I totally could have added to this list would be number 11. Um, God, what is Sonia Renee Taylor's book called? Why am I blanking right now? Sonia Renee Taylor. The Body is Not an Apology, right? That's another phenomenal book, right? But this one talks a lot about sex and healthy bodies, which is just absolutely beautiful. The last piece of this, before I move away from it, because I could spend a whole hour talking about this book. He has this really radical idea, and when I say I support this, I do in context and in theory, but in reality, it would be really hard for us to do as humans. But he talks about casually date and do not commit to anybody until you've been together for at least 1 year. So go out, you know, my partner's name is Jim. We've been together for 8 years. let's say I met Jim tomorrow for the first time. I will then go and I will date him casually for 1 full year. And we will move through, and this is why he says to do it. We can move through new relationship energy. We can move through the honeymoon phase. We can move through all of that stuff and then finally see one another and finally see our authentic selves without these masks that we put up. And then we can decide if we want to commit to one another. So hard. I don't know if I could do it even today if Jim and I broke up, but I just think it's a really cool idea the way he tries to touch on all of these different topics within, especially dating and relationships. So, really cool book here. He also has a podcast as well. So, okay, 5 more halfway through. This next one, if you like science, if you like research, then this book is for you. This book is all about fantasy. It's all about what you enjoy, why we as humans enjoy it, why 99% of us, I think 98, 99% of us have the ability to fantasize, why fantasy is healthy, why fantasy and reality are two totally separate things. And it's Justin Lehmiller's Tell Me What You Want. Okay. The first huge part of this book, I would say the first maybe 100 pages or so, if not more, looking at this, is all just research, is all about what do men fantasize about? What does research tell you? What do women fantasize about? Cis, trans, gender non-binary, straight, gay, sexual fluid, asexual. What does everyone fantasize about? And it's phenomenal. It can really be groundbreaking when you sit and look and read and realize, wow, fantasy is actually really healthy for who I am as a human on this planet, right? We talk about, or I should say, I talk about with my clients all the time, sex lives inside of us and outside of us, right? It's in and it's out. And what that means is sex exists all around us out in the world. And we're exposed to so many different influences on how we grow and develop as sexual humans. And sex also exists within us too, meaning human sexuality, meaning sexual orientation, meaning that energy that we're born with that we have to learn how to manage and evolve and grow. And so this book is phenomenal and just helping you accept the fact that fantasy is okay, masturbation is okay, and here's the big one, spoiler alert, although you may already know this. Just because you fantasize about something doesn't mean you actually want to do it. Fantasy and reality are two different things, right? Just because I think, oh, wow, it would be really cool to move to Portugal, right? In reality, I can't move to Portugal. I actually don't want to. I mean, it would be cool to. That would be pretty cool. But in reality, I can't do that. Fantasy is very similar. Just because I sit and fantasize about a freaking gangbang or something, right? Doesn't necessarily mean I want to do that. In fact, that sounds like a lot of work and I just don't have time. But when you look at this, I can sit and fantasize about it because what could that give me, right? What could fantasize about a gangbang give me? Okay, it could give me, I don't have to be in control of everything. I can sort of just show up. I don't have to engage. I really like the idea of being a dominant, or I like the idea of being a submissive. It taps into all of this stuff, again, that lives within us and outside us. So, Dr. Justin Lehmiller's Tell Me What You Want. Great book. He also has a podcast called The Psychology of Sex. The Psychology of Sex podcast, I think. Great content, very research heavy, a lot of guests. Episodes are usually like 30 minutes long. So Cool book here. Okay, 4 more. Let's do this one. So, a huge thing, it actually works pretty well coming off of the fantasy book. A huge component of human sexuality outside of actually engaging with it and fantasizing about it is the idea of engaging with it with ourselves. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. So, sex with other people, fantasizing about it, but then engaging with yourselves and how that looks for you and how that feels for you. And so, we talk about this a lot in as sex therapists, as relationship therapists, but the idea of porn, right? Porn is really confusing for a lot of people. And that makes sense. I get it. Porn can be really destructive for a lot of people. And that's because our society has really never taught us how to engage with porn or understand porn. Dr. Eric Sprinkle, who wrote this really good book called DIY, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's all about the research on masturbation. Said, and I think he's the one that said this, I'm almost positive, porn is not bad. The way our society treats porn is bad. And what he means by that is that we really villainize this content and this entertainment that doesn't have to be villainized. And why do we villainize it? Because our world is messed up with purity culture and sex negativity. I'm not in what's the right phrase here? I'm not an apologist for porn. I am a supporter of porn though. Porn is not bad. People who engage with porn can be really bad, right? There are producers, there are really awful people that take advantage and hurt people. But the beauty of what has happened as we've moved into the 21st century and as we've moved into 2020 and 2021 and all of that, the 2010s, is that a lot of regulations have come out and porn has actually gotten way more ethical for everyone involved. And we tend to forget that. And that's really important to remember. So, what is this book? It's called Ethical Porn for Dicks. Where am I going here? Ethical Porn by Dicks by Dr. David Ley, right? So, this really is a penis owner's guide, a man's guide for responsible viewing pleasure. It's a really tiny little, I call it like a pocketbook. It's really cool, some designs, really research heavy. This again is one of the first books I read on my journey to becoming a certified sex therapist. This gives you a ton of research, and I love how he talks about porn, and he gives for a lot of heterosexual couples, he gives a ton of input into how to have conversations if you're a man with your female partner, right? And there's whole sections in here dedicated to female identifying individuals, women on what could porn actually mean in your relationship, and let's try to understand it and dissect it. So it's not going to solve all the problems because again, porn is really treated in a really complicated way in our society. But again, if you're just interested in understanding a little bit more research and why people hate porn, and why it's doesn't lead to more assaults, it does not lead to more rape, it does not lead to more aggressive behavior, all that stuff is a myth, then check out this book. Okay, I gotta get comfortable. 3 more. Let's see. I'll save the last 2 because they're a little bit more well-known, and I'll start with this one. So this may be shocking. It was shocking to me when I chose it as one of my 10 books that I recommend because this is the newest book. So when I say I recommend to all my clients, it's the newest one. I've only got to recommend it to a few people, but this is a book that came out in 2024. And it's a little bit different than the other books. So it is called Want, and it's by the phenomenal Gillian Anderson. And if you don't know who Gillian Anderson is, then I don't know what to tell you. I think you're missing out a lot in life. I think your life hasn't been maybe as great as you thought it was. Gillian Anderson is of X-Files fame, but why I love her is she is Dr. Jean Milburn in the Netflix show Sex Education, and she plays a sex therapist. And for those of you, especially sex therapists, who are like, oh, that show's not, the greatest representation, calm down. It is one of the best representations of sex therapy and human sexuality that has ever existed. Not everyone is going to get everything right, but that show is just amazing. And Gillian Anderson decided she was so influenced and she fell so much in love with, her role in learning about fantasy and learning about intimacy that she decided, you know what? I'm going to make a book all about the fantasies that women have. And so this is a collection of a a wide variety of fantasies that were submitted to her. And it's all anonymous. And so women just emailed her. Well, probably didn't email her. I mean, they probably did, but I would love her email address. Just submitted their fantasies to Gillian, right? Rough and Ready, fantasies all about BDSM, fantasies all about wanting to be worshipped, fantasies all about consensual non-consent. Consensual non-consent is like the number 2 fantasy. Going back to Justin's book, consensual non-consent is like in the top few fantasies for women, right? Consensual non-consent is essentially what we would call a rape fantasy. But these women don't want to be raped. They don't want to be assaulted. But consensual non-consent is this idea of like taking power. I just don't want to have this power anymore. So there's being captive, kink, being with strangers, submission, exploration. Give me more. I want to be watched. Be gentle. And so there are just all of these fantasies submitted and written by women across the world. And Gillian even wrote one of them herself and submitted it. And so why I love this book is because there's a lot of people who are like, I have no idea how to engage with my sexual self. I have no idea how to, I don't want to watch porn, right? As we just talked about, porn is pretty heavy in our society. I don't want to watch porn. I have no idea how to engage and how to understand arousal or energy in my body. And so what do? And I typically tell people, okay, let's find some erotica, right? Like, let's just see if that works for you, or some like audio erotica too, right? Just listening to people talk. And then Gillian put out this book, which is just all about fantasy, and obsessed. Couldn't recommend it anymore. So check it out. Want by Gillian Anderson. Really fun, really cool. Okay, last 2 here. Probably 2 of the most well-known outside of the Come As You Are, but this one is called The Ethical Slut. And so Ethical Slut, well-known. I mean, Dossie, Dossie Easton and Jan Hardy just really changing the landscape around sex and sex positivity. This book is all about just opening up, understanding polyamory, understanding that, I think my favorite parts, it's like one of the first sentences where she's just like, we're all sluts. And I'm like, whoa, does that hit home, right? Slut does not have to be a bad word, right? Slut can be a really gratifying word and empowering word. And so this book talks all about polyamory, opening up, breaking myths. It's just a really classic guide to polyamory. So if you want something that feels really classic, this is definitely the book for you. A lot of people find it to be somewhat boring. I personally did not find it boring, probably because I was reading it, when I was in this phase of my life that I really wanted to just hold on to everything, and grab all the information that I could. But, some people do. But again, phenomenal book, and I think it's on its 3rd edition. It could be on its 4th edition now, so very cool. And then the last one, I wouldn't be a poly specialist if I didn't talk about one of the most groundbreaking books that has come out in the past 3 to 4 years, and that is Polysecure by Jessica Fern. So, attachment, trauma, and consensual non-monogamy. Love that she uses the phrase consensual non-monogamy. A lot of people, like myself, gravitate more towards that than ethical non-monogamy, and that's just because consent um, provides desire, provides wanting, and ethical is can sort of be gray, and we don't want anything to really be ethical. We want it to be consensual. So this book is broken into 2 main parts. The first one is explaining attachment style, which is very cool. It goes into Mary Ainsworth's work. And then the second part is all about, okay, how do we take this attachment style that we have and then combine it with wanting to be in an open relationship? This is so scary. So, uh, a very cool book here, and she just wrote a sequel. She wrote a sequel. She wrote a follow-up book called Polly Wise, with David. I can't think of David's last name, but it goes a little bit more into detail about conflict strategies, which is really cool for individuals who are like, I'm really struggling with the conflict I have in my poly relationship. So, provide some really cool insight there. But yes, Polysecure, Jessica Fern, couldn't recommend it more. Okay, well, those were 10 books that I recommend to all of my clients. Like I said in the beginning, there are so many books that exist. I would love to hear book recommendations that all of you have, that you find to be really gratifying and helpful for you on your journey through human sexuality and getting to know yourself. So feel free to comment on this video and just let me know. And if I haven't read them and you really recommend them, I will add them to my list. So, but like I said in the beginning, my goal is to do more lives in 2025. So, any ideas any of you have, I will gladly just hop on and start talking about anything related to sex and relationships. But for those of you who joined, thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.